She was radiant at the altar, the perfect veil, the rehearsed smile, everything according to protocol. Her dress, a creation of silk and lace that cost more than my first car, shimmered under the stained glass light of the ridiculously opulent church. Every detail had been meticulously planned, not by her, but for her. From where I sat in the front pew, I could see the tiny, nervous tremor in her hand as she held it out for her groom, Ethan, my daughter, Jessica, my little girl playing the part of a princess in a fairy tale she hadn't written. But no one, least of all us, was prepared for what was about to happen. Before the vows, before the officiant could even begin his saccharine speech about love and unity, Jessica turned. Her eyes didn't scan the crowd. They found us, me, my husband David, and our son Mark, her family, the ones who had packed her school lunches, cheered at her soccer games, and held her through teenage heartbreaks. She took a deep breath, and with a voice as clear and cold as the winter air, she spoke into the microphone pinned to her dress. "I just want to thank the Vances for welcoming me so completely," she began, her gaze fixed on her new, wealthy in-laws sitting opposite us. Then she looked back at us, a strange, unreadable expression on her face. This is my real family now." The silence that followed was a physical thing. It crashed down on the congregation, suffocating the soft organ music and the rustle of programs. I felt the air leave my lungs. It was a direct hit, a sniper's bullet to the heart, and it found its mark. I felt the collective gasp of our relatives behind us, the confused whispers. My husband David's hand, calloused from years of working with wood, found mine. His grip was an anchor in the sudden, violent storm. Beside me, Mark, my sweet, loyal son, just stared at his own polished shoes, his face a mask of disbelief and shame. The words echoed in the cavernous space, "My real family now," as if the last 26 years of her life had been a dress rehearsal for a better part, as if we were the embarrassing opening act, to be shuffled off stage before the main event. I watched as her new mother-in-law, Eleanor Vance, gave a faint, triumphant smile. She had won. She had taken my daughter, and in one public, brutal statement, erased us. David squeezed my hand again, harder this time. I looked at him. His jaw was set, his eyes filled with a quiet fury I knew so well. He didn't need to say a word. In that single shared glance, we made a decision. We would not sit here and be accessories to our own humiliation. We would not applaud this new union that was built on the ashes of our family's respect. Slowly, with a dignity I didn't know I possessed, David and I stood up. The creak of the old wooden pew was the only sound in the church. Then Mark stood with us, 3 solitary figures in a sea of stunned faces. We didn't look at Jessica. I couldn't. If I saw her face, I knew I would either shatter into a million pieces or scream until the stained glass windows rattled. Instead, I focused on the heavy oak doors at the back of the church. We turned our backs on the altar, on the bride who was once our daughter, and we walked. Before the vows, before the false applause, before the ceremony could formally bury the last shred of dignity she had denied us. Each step down that long, carpeted aisle was an agony. I could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes on our backs. I could hear the frantic, hushed whispers erupting in our wake. But we didn't stop. We walked out of the church and into the bright, indifferent sunshine of a Saturday afternoon, leaving behind a wedding that wasn't just a union but a rupture, a clean, brutal break. This is the story of how my daughter traded her family in front of God and everyone, and how we chose not to stay and watch. Because sometimes love requires your presence, and sometimes it demands your departure, and sometimes the greatest act of self-love is finding the courage to walk away before the words, "I do," seal a lie. I'm glad to have you here. This was the hardest day of my life, and it's a story I need to tell. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. And if you feel so inclined, a subscription to the channel helps more than you know. The months leading up to that moment had been a slow-motion car crash. It all started when Jessica met Ethan Vance. He was charming, handsome, and came from a family whose name was etched onto the sides of hospital wings and university libraries. The Vances were old money, the kind that moved with a quiet confidence that our middle-class family could only ever observe from a distance. We lived in a comfortable suburban home in Ohio, a place filled with laughter, mismatched furniture, and the smell of whatever I was baking that day. David was a master carpenter, a man who could create beauty with his hands. I was a part-time librarian. We were happy. We thought we had given our children everything that mattered: love, stability, and a strong sense of who they were. We were wrong. When Jessica first brought Ethan home, we were charmed. He was polite, praised my cooking, and listened with genuine interest as David explained the joinery on a cabinet he was building. But then we met his mother. Eleanor Vance was a woman carved from ice. She glided into our home, her eyes doing a quick, dismissive inventory of our lives. How quaint, she had said, looking at our family photos on the mantelpiece. The word hung in the air, a polite-sounding insult. From that day on, a subtle campaign began. It was a war of 1,000 paper cuts. There were comments about Jessica's regional accent, suggestions for more appropriate clothing, and invitations to exclusive events where we were pointedly not included. Jessica, desperate to fit in, started to change. Her laughter became more subdued, her opinions softer. She began to echo Eleanor's phrases and adopt her mannerisms. She was being polished, refined, and remade in their image. The first major crack appeared over the wedding dress. I had saved for years, dreaming of the day I would take Jessica to a lovely local boutique, the one where I had bought my own simple gown. It was a mother-daughter tradition I had cherished in my mind. But Eleanor would have none of it. "Oh, Sarah, that's a sweet thought, but Jessica needs something significant," she'd said, her voice dripping with condescension. She flew Jessica to New York for a private appointment with a designer whose name I couldn't even pronounce. When Jessica came back, she showed me a photo of the dress. It was beautiful, of course, but it felt like a costume. A stranger's dress for a stranger's wedding. "It's a gift, Mum, from Eleanor," Jessica had said, avoiding my eyes. "We can use the money you saved for the catering." I felt like I'd been slapped. She had taken my dream and repurposed it for canapés. David saw the hurt in my face. "If the Vances want to pay for a New York dress, that's their business," he told Jessica calmly that evening. "But your mother wasn't saving for a dress, Jess. She was saving for a memory with you. There's a difference." Jessica had cried, accusing us of not being happy for her, of trying to hold her back. It was the first time she had used the Vances' logic against us. It wouldn't be the last. The wedding planning became Eleanor's personal project. Our suggestions for the guest list were politely ignored. Our family traditions were deemed too folksy. We were being systematically erased from our own daughter's wedding. We became spectators, then obstacles, and finally, on that day in the church, we became the before picture she needed to discard to create her perfect after. As we drove away from the church, the silence in our small sedan was heavier than any argument. Mark, in the back seat, finally broke it. His voice was raw with anger. "Who does she think she is? After everything you and Dad did for her, who says that?" David kept his eyes on the road, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I just stared out the window, watching the neat manicured lawns of the Vances' world blur past. The beautiful day felt like a mockery. I couldn't process the pain. It was too vast, too absolute. All I could feel was a profound sense of loss, as if the daughter I had raised had died, and a cold, polished stranger had taken her place at that altar. In that car, driving away from the biggest day of her life, we were a family adrift, cut loose from our own history by the cruelest of words. We had chosen to leave, but it felt like we were the ones who had been left behind. Returning home was surreal. The house was exactly as we'd left it that morning, full of nervous excitement and anticipation. My hat was still on the hall table, David's good suit jacket slung over a chair. On the fridge was a photo of a younger, smiling Jessica, arms slung around Mark, a gap-toothed grin on her face from a family vacation years ago. Looking at it felt like looking at a ghost. The joy captured in that picture was from another lifetime, a life before our family had been publicly amputated. The first few days were a blur of hollow activities. David retreated to his workshop in the garage, the sound of his saw and sander a constant angry buzz that filled the house. Mark stayed in his room, the bass from his music, a muffled, rhythmic thumping against the floor. I wandered through the rooms, picking things up and putting them down, unable to settle. Every corner held a memory of Jessica, her first steps in the living room, the height chart penciled onto a doorframe in the kitchen, her worn-out copy of Little Women on the bookshelf. The silence she left behind was deafening. Our relatives started calling. My sister Mary was furious. "I can't believe it, Sarah. We were all just flawed. What in God's name has gotten into that girl?" Her anger was comforting in a way, a validation that we weren't crazy, that what had happened was as monstrous as it felt. David's brother called, offering quiet, steady support. But each call was also a painful rehashing of the event, forcing us to relive the humiliation over and over again. Jessica didn't call, not a text, not an email, nothing. The person who did call 3 days after the wedding was Eleanor Vance. I saw her name on the caller ID, and my stomach turned to ice. David took the phone from my hand and put it on speaker. "Sarah? David?" Eleanor's voice was crisp and devoid of any warmth. There was no preamble, no apology for her role in the debacle. "I am calling because Jessica is very, very upset. You created an appalling scene at her wedding. To walk out like that, it was a deliberate, selfish act to ruin her special day. She's been in tears for days." I was too stunned to speak. She had the audacity to blame us. David's voice was low, and even when he finally responded, "Eleanor, we did what we had to do. Your family, with your money and your influence, you bought our daughter, but you don't get to buy our dignity. We won't be your props." "How dare you," she scoffed. "We have given Jessica a life you could only dream of. The least you could do is be grateful and supportive, not cause a public spectacle." "We're done here, Eleanor," David said, and he hung up the phone. He stood there for a moment, his chest rising and falling. "The nerve of that woman," he said, more to himself than to me. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jessica. My heart leaped for a split second, a foolish, motherly hope that it would be an apology. The message was long, a block of text that was clearly a dictated monologue of her new mother-in-law's talking points. "I can't believe you would be so selfish and ruin my wedding. After everything the Vances have done for me, for US, you embarrass me in front of everyone. You made my most important day all about you. I am so hurt and disappointed. I don't even know who you are anymore." Reading those words was worse than her speech at the altar. This was her calculated. This was her, sober and deliberate, doubling down on the betrayal. The last line, "I don't even know who you are anymore," was a particular cruelty. She was the one who had become a stranger. "Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And if you're finding value in my story, please leave a like, it helps more than you know." That text message was a turning point. The initial shock and grief began to harden into something else, resolve. David and I sat at our small kitchen table late into the night, nursing cups of tea we didn't drink. We talked more than we had in years, sorting through the wreckage of our feelings. Mark came downstairs and joined us, pulling up a chair. "We can't fix this," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "She has to be the one to fix it. We can't keep reaching out and getting slapped away." "Mom's right," Mark said, his earlier anger now replaced by a quiet sadness. "She made her choice, she chose them. We have to let her." David nodded, his expression grim. "We won't be their punching bags. We won't let them control this narrative or our emotions. We draw a line. Here." He drew an invisible line on the worn oak of the table. "We live our lives, we focus on us. on what's left, and so we did. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I blocked Eleanor's number. We made a pact not to reach out to Jessica. The ball was in her court. We had to protect our own hearts. It was an act of self-preservation, a decision to stop the bleeding. Weeks turned into months. Life, as it does, insisted on moving forward. The autumn leaves turned from green to brilliant shades of red and gold, then fell, leaving the trees bare. Mark went back to college, and his absence made the house feel even bigger and emptier. David poured his pain into his work, creating beautiful, intricate pieces of furniture that seemed to hold all his unspoken grief. I threw myself into my garden, pulling weeds with a vengeance, nurturing new life from the soil, as if to prove that things could still grow. But the void was always there, a phantom limb that ached with memory. I'd see a girl on the street with the same shade of blonde hair as Jessica and my breath would catch. I'd be in the grocery store and instinctively reach for her favorite brand of cereal before remembering. We learned about her life through the glossy, curated lens of social media. A friend of a friend would mention seeing photos of the honeymoon in Bali, Jessica smiling serenely on a white sand beach, Ethan beside her, both of them tanned and perfect. Then there were pictures from charity galas, equestrian events, and weekend trips to the Hamptons. Every photo felt like another twist of the knife, a bright and shiny advertisement for the new life for which she had traded us. She looked happy, but it was a brittle, posed happiness. The smile never quite reached her eyes. In every picture she was standing slightly behind Ethan or beside Eleanor, a beautiful, well-dressed accessory. She wasn't the star of her own life anymore. She was a supporting character in theirs, and we, her old family, were nowhere to be seen. We had been completely and utterly erased. The first sign that the fairy tale might have a dark side arrived about 6 months after the wedding. It was a flimsy postcard tucked into our mailbox between bills and junk mail. The picture was of a sun-drenched Italian villa. The handwriting on the back was Jessica's, but it was rushed and impersonal. Ciao from Tuscany. The wine is amazing. Hope you are all well. Thinking of you. Love, Jess. Thinking of you. The 3 words were a breadcrumb, a tiny, almost insignificant offering, but it was the first contact she had initiated that wasn't an attack. David looked at it, his expression unreadable. Tuscany, he said flatly, and placed the card on the kitchen counter, where it sat for days, a silent testament to the chasm between her world and ours. It wasn't an apology, not even close, but it was a crack, a tiny fissure in the perfect facade. The second crack appeared during a mundane trip to the grocery store. I had driven to a market basket in a neighboring town, one I didn't usually frequent, in search of a specific brand of olive oil. As I was comparing labels, a woman approached me. "Sarah, is that you?" I turned to see a vaguely familiar face. It took me a moment to place her. She was a cousin of the Vances, Brenda, I think, a woman I had met once during a tense pre-wedding brunch. She was a relentless talker, one of those people who fills every silence with chatter. "Oh my goodness, it's so good to see you," she gushed, either unaware or unconcerned with the drama of the wedding. "How have you been? We were all so well, you know." It was quite the day. I gave her a tight, polite smile, hoping to make a quick escape. But Brenda was on a roll. "Jessica is just blossoming, isn't she? Eleanor has taken her under her wing completely. It's a full-time job, really, turning a girl like that into a proper Vance." She said it as if it were a compliment. "Eleanor has her on all the right charity boards. She redid her entire wardrobe, threw out all her old things," she said. "She's even got her working with a dialect coach. Can you believe it?" I just nodded, my grocery basket feeling heavier by the second. "It's a lot for the poor girl, though," Brenda continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Between you and me, Eleanor runs that house like a military base. She has Jessica's entire schedule mapped out, from Pilates in the morning to which social events she's allowed to attend. And that Ethan, he's a sweet boy, But he's never around, always on business trips for his father. He travels more than he's home. It must be lonely." Her words painted a picture that was far different from the sun-drenched photos on social media. A gilded cage, just as I had suspected, threw out all her old things. The phrase stuck with me. Was I one of the old things she had thrown out? Brenda finally exhausted her supply of gossip and bustled away, leaving me standing in the aisle, my heart pounding with a strange mix of vindication and sorrow. My daughter wasn't happy, she was being managed. The final crack became a full-blown fracture a few weeks later. It was after 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night. The house was quiet. David was asleep, and I was reading in bed when my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello, Mum." The voice was unmistakably Jessica's, but it was thick with tears, stripped of the polished accent Eleanor had been forcing on her. It was the voice of my daughter. "Jess, honey, are you okay? Where are you?" A sob broke from her. "I'm at home," she choked out, and I knew she meant the Vance mansion, not our house, not her home. "Mum, I'm so lonely." And then it all came pouring out. The carefully constructed dam of her perfect life burst, and the flood of misery was overwhelming. She told me about Eleanor's constant criticism, the passive-aggressive comments about her background, her manners, her family. She talked about the suffocating control, how Eleanor monitored her spending, chose her friends, and belittled her in front of their staff. She confessed that Ethan was a ghost in their marriage, a man who answered to his mother before his wife, always choosing work or his family's demands over her. "She treats me like a project," Jessica cried, her voice cracking. "I'm her daughter-in-law project. I'm not a person. I'm just something for her to mold and show off, and Ethan just lets her. He just stands there and lets her do it." I listened, my own heart aching for her, but I kept my voice calm. The angry, hurt part of me wanted to scream. What did you expect? But the mother in me just listened. Then came the part I had been unconsciously dreading. "Mum, I was wondering if you could help me out," she said, her voice dropping. "Eleanor has me on this ridiculous allowance, like I'm a child. It's barely enough for gas. I need to get some things, and I don't have any money of my own. Could you maybe lend me some?" There it was. She wasn't just calling for her mother, she was calling for her old bank. The hurt was sharp and immediate, but it was mixed with a sudden clarifying strength. I knew what I had to do. "Jessica," I said, my voice gentle but firm, "I hear that you're unhappy, and that breaks my heart. It truly does, but money is not something I can help you with." A stunned silence on the other end of the line. "This is the life you chose, honey," I continued, the words coming slowly, carefully. "You stood up in front of 100 people and said the Vances were your real family. If you're in trouble, your real family needs to be the one to help you. My money, David's money, it comes from the world you were so eager to leave behind." It was the hardest thing I'd ever said to her. Tough love, born from the deepest wound imaginable. "If you want to talk," I said, my voice softening slightly, "I mean really talk, about what happened, about us, then you need to come home. You need to look your father and your brother in the eye, and have a real conversation. We can't fix this over the phone, and I won't send you money to help you stay in a situation that is destroying you. The door to our home is open, Jess, but you're the one who has to walk through it." I could hear her quiet weeping on the other end. "I have to go," she whispered, and the line went dead. I hung up the phone, my hand shaking. I didn't know if I had just pushed my daughter further away, or thrown her, the only lifeline that could actually save her. For 2 weeks after that late-night phone call, there was only silence. I replayed our conversation in my head 1,000 times, torturing myself with doubt. Had I been too harsh? Had I severed the last fragile thread connecting us? David reassured me. "You did the right thing, Sarah," he'd said, his voice full of a conviction I didn't feel. "You offered her a way back, not a way out. There's a difference." Then, on a grey Saturday afternoon, it happened. I was in the kitchen, trying to lose myself in the familiar rhythm of kneading bread dough, when I saw a rental car, a nondescript, generic sedan, pull up to the curb. My hands froze in the dough. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. The driver's side door opened, and Jessica got out. She looked diminished. The polished Vance gloss was gone. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, not a professionally styled coif. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, a stark contrast to the designer clothes from her social media photos. She looked tired, pale, and impossibly young. She stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, just looking at the house, as if trying to gather the courage to walk up the path. She was alone. I opened the front door before she could knock. We just stood there for a second, a chasm of unspoken words and pain between us. "Hi, Mom," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Hi, honey," I managed to reply. "Come in." The atmosphere inside was thick with tension. David came in from his workshop, wiping his hands on a rag, his face a mask of neutrality. Mark, who was home for the weekend, came downstairs, saw his sister, and immediately his arms crossed over his chest, his expression hard and unforgiving. We all gathered in the living room, the four of us sitting in the same spots we always had, yet everything was different. It felt less like a family reunion and more like a parole hearing. Jessica was the one to break the silence. The tears started to fall before she even spoke. "I am so sorry," she began, her voice breaking. She looked at each of us, her gaze finally meeting ours. "There's no excuse for what I did. It was cruel, and it was wrong, and I hate myself for it." And then, like a dam breaking, she confessed everything. She told us about the immense pressure from Eleanor, the constant subtle brainwashing that had convinced her our family was holding her back, that our love was somehow less valuable than the Vance's prestige. She admitted her own deep-seated insecurity, her desperate, pathetic need to be accepted by them. She told me to say it," Jessica admitted, her voice choked with shame. "Eleanor coached me. The night before the wedding, she said I needed to make a clear statement of loyalty, to show everyone that I was a Vance now. She said it would make Ethan's father proud. I was so scared of losing everything, of them deciding I wasn't good enough. So I did it. I said it, and it was the worst, most horrible mistake of my life. Hearing that it wasn't a spontaneous cruelty, but a rehearsed one, a line fed to her by that venomous woman, somehow made it both better and worse. My daughter hadn't just been cruel, she had been a puppet." Mark, who had been silent until now, finally spoke, his voice low and tight with anger. "A mistake. Jess, you blew up our family, in public. For them, for people who treat you like a pet." "I know," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I know, Mark, and I can never take it back. All I can do is say I'm sorry." As we were sitting in that raw, painful moment, her phone, lying on the coffee table, began to ring. The name on the screen flashed. "Ethan." Jessica flinched. On instinct, I reached over and pressed the speakerphone button. "Jess, where the hell are you?" Ethan's voice was frantic, but laced with an annoyance that was telling. "Mom is losing her mind. You disappeared without a word. You have a charity luncheon to attend this afternoon. You need to come home. Now." Home? He meant the mansion. Before Jessica could answer, a sharper, colder voice cut in. It was Eleanor. "Jessica, I don't know what little game you're playing, but your tantrum is over. Ethan's father has clients he needs to impress this afternoon. Your place is here, beside your husband. Get back in your car and come home immediately." There it was. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "We were worried about you." It was a command, an order to resume her duties as the family accessory. I saw something shift in Jessica's eyes, a spark of the old fire, the defiance I hadn't seen in over a year. She picked up the phone, her hand steady now. "I'm not coming back, Eleanor," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Not now, not ever." "What did you say?" Eleanor hissed. "I said I'm not coming back," Jessica repeated. "And Ethan, I am home." She looked around our simple, love-worn living room, at her father, her brother, at me. "This is my home. This is my real family, the one I should never have left." "We're done. I'm done." She ended the call and tossed the phone onto the sofa as if it were on fire. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't heavy with pain anymore. It was light with possibility. For the first time in a very, very long time, my daughter was free. The year that followed was one of slow, deliberate healing. It wasn't a fairy tale ending where everything was instantly fixed. Trust, once shattered so completely, had to be rebuilt piece by piece. We started family therapy, the 5 of us talking through the hurt in a neutral space. Jessica got a small apartment of her own and found a job at a local bookstore. She filed for divorce. The Vances didn't contest it. I imagine to them it was like returning a faulty product. Mark was the hardest to win back, but Jessica was patient. She showed up for him, calling him at school, asking about his classes, remembering the small things. Slowly he let her back in. David started inviting her to his workshop again on weekends, and they would spend hours together, not always talking, just being in each other's company, mending their bond over the smell of sawdust and wood glue. For Jessica and me, our healing came in long conversations over endless cups of tea at my kitchen table. We talked about her fears, my hurt, and the powerful, seductive allure of a world that shines but isn't gold. She was rediscovering who she was without the Vance name attached, and I was rediscovering the daughter I thought I had lost forever. The story ends here, a year and a half after the wedding that wasn't. We're all gathered in my backyard for a simple Sunday barbecue. Mark is teasing Jessica about a guy she started seeing. David is at the grill, a rare, relaxed smile on his face. Laughter fills the air, real and unforced. The scars are still there, pale lines on our family's heart, but they are reminders of a wound that has healed. I look at my daughter, truly radiant now in her simple t-shirt and jeans, her face full of genuine happiness, and I understand. Sometimes a family has to break completely apart to find its way back, stronger and more real than it ever was before. Thank you for watching until here. I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for your support. It means the world to our small community.